I wish I had done this as I started to notice the buildup of emotions and stress. But here's the thing. So here's the second thing is, that's my other AAR point, after action review point, is I didn't even realize, I didn't even recognize or realize that my emotional plate was starting to build up and starting to spill over. I hadn't even noticed that, which is, again, man, that's I would have hoped that after 4 years of intentionally working on this stuff that I would be further along in my self-awareness. Clearly I'm not. I just need to accept it and deal with it and face it and continue to grow from here. What is going on, EQ gangsters? So, not super excited to share this episode with you. Most of the time I am. This one I am not, because this one is so much for not getting triggered anymore. Oh man, I thought I was doing so good. So I have been, probably the last 2 or 3 days, had a low grade emotional trigger just kind of operating. It was kind of weird. It's like the trigger was pulled and I never recocked. You know what I mean? It just took, it took a few days to work through it. And honestly, it's so funny. I was telling somebody this recently. All the things that I'm doing for EQ, for emotional health, emotional intelligence, are all because I still need them. So even doing this podcast and YouTube, it's all stuff this is, honestly, this is no joke. Full transparency. You guys are like, man, this guy needs help. So literally what helped me get untriggered and kind of calm the emotions down was doing this episode. When I was taking the notes for this episode, I was forced to kind of work through and process my emotions, because for some reason that was not my default yet, unfortunately. So it is still not muscle memory yet, clearly. So thankfully I've made a truckload of progress over the past 4 years, but still have a lot of work to do. This episode is sponsored by Shay Sparks, who is an author and podcast host of the Power of Investing in People podcast. She's part of the Lima Charlie Network. She is the author of the book, #Firestarters, How to Be a Spark of Hope in the Midst of Change. Shay is a super lady and has some great interviews on her podcast. So again, check that out. Check out her podcast at The Power of Investing in People. So again, 2 or 3 days ago, we're going on our way to church, and here's the thing: is I don't even know. I'm still working through, like, trying to identify what the origin story was of the trigger, like what was going on. And I think I've identified a few things, but I don't know what the actual final kind of straw was that emotionally triggered me. So for those of y'all that are watching on YouTube, you're going to see me looking down while I'm looking at the notes that I took. For those of y'all on a podcast, I am looking at notes to make sure I don't miss anything. So here is the con, right? The con is I got triggered a couple of days ago, and it lasted, again, kind of low grade for a couple of days, 2 or 3 days. 2 or 3 days. The pro is I went to maybe a 4 or a 5, not my old default of a 10. So even though I was triggered, thankfully it did not go to where full Hulk mode. It was, it was very different. This time, well, I'm going to explain kind of here's what it looked like. So this is literally what it looked like when I was triggered. I was bottled up. I went into my emotional cave. I felt stuck. I felt emotionally constipated. I was letting my emotions sit and simmer and eventually even build up. The more I avoided acknowledging them and processing them, the more they seemed to grow and have more control over me. The more I tried to control how I felt without trying to understand my emotional data at the time, the deeper into the emotional hole I went. I was short with my wife. I didn't want to answer her question when she asked how I was doing. I said, fine, which, is not shocking. I don't think it took a rocket scientist to figure out how I was blowing smoke. That was just I resorted to my default, and it's like pre-EQ default days of like, fine. She asked if I wanted to talk. I said no. She asked if there was anything wrong. I said no. Again, like I was actually fooling her. I was not emotionally available for anyone. And, and so here's, I think, some factors that were contributing to me getting triggered. And when I talk about these factors, I had not allowed myself to emotionally process any of these things I'm about to tell you, which I think led to a slow burn and my emotional stress plate starting to pile up to where it eventually, the stress eventually spilled off the plate over the edges. So I am in a position right now where there's a very good chance I'm gonna have to scale my coaching business, which is I'm so excited about if that's the direction that it ends up going. There's a ton of questions to be asked and answered in that process if I end up scaling my coaching business. I'm a little concerned if and when I scale my coaching business about making sure that I maintain the same quality of coaching that I'm currently providing by myself. So if and when I need to bring on other coaches, I want to make sure that they can bring the same results and outcomes and transformation in the leaders' lives that I'm able to get as well. So that's a little bit of a concern for me as I, praying about it, reflecting on it, figuring out, okay, what does this need to look like? I'm also concerned about bringing on the right coaches, which is a whole nother ball game, right? So I want to make sure that's a major minor detail. I'm also not sure where our country is headed. For some reason, I am not super good at the abstract, at future abstract. Present abstract, I'm not too bad with. I'm pretty comfortable with. But for some reason, future abstract is very hard for me to wrap my being around. I'm not sure why. I haven't done a deep dive on that yet, but for some reason that causes me some low-grade stress and anxiety, not sure where our country is headed right now with so many different variables and factors going on around the world and in our country. I'm not sure. Let's see. I've slipped on my weight and my eating and my fitness, and I'm not sure why. And that is very, very frustrating for me. That creates a whole nother set of emotions and stuff all by itself. So those, let's see, what did I say? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So those 5 things have all piled up on my emotional plate, and I have not taken the time or made the time to do my journaling, to do some of my EQ exercises that I talk about in previous EQ episodes on the EQ Gangster podcast. And so they're just building up. They built up on the emotional plate, and again have spilled over, which I think ultimately has led to getting triggered. I think there's a couple other areas too. Well, in fact, I know there's a couple other areas. So another one is there is a little bit of conflict that is going on between 2 folks that I know, and I have not figured out what my responsibility is in this dynamic. Do I try to help out? Resolve conflict? Do I get involved? Do I not get involved? Is it out of my boundaries? Is it not my responsibility? and there's obviously more details surrounding that. So, and just knowing that there's conflict between two of these folks that I know is also creating some low grade stress. So anyway, that's another one too that I hadn't mentioned. So here are some of the emotions that I have felt during this most recent trigger, because I just did this is part of the EQ exercise that I recommend to folks, right? Part of the Go APED process, APED, acknowledge, permission, express, and discuss. Acknowledge, permission, express, and discuss. So acknowledge your emotions. So boom. Now, again, I should have done all this stuff as I've started feeling this stuff, not after I got triggered. Now, I'm glad I'm doing it. So I'm even though it's post trigger, I'm glad that I'm doing it. And in fact, again, this was one of the things that helped me get untriggered or reduce some of those emotions and bring some of that intensity down. I wish I had done it, as I started to, two things. One, as I wish I had done this as I started to notice the buildup of emotions and stress. But here's the thing. So this is the second thing is, that's my other AAR point, after action review point, is I didn't even realize, I didn't even recognize or realize that my emotional plate was starting to build up and starting to spill over. I hadn't even noticed that, which is, again, that's I would have hoped that after 4 years of intentionally working on this stuff that I would be further along in my self-awareness. Clearly I'm not. I just need to accept it and deal with it and face it and continue to grow from here. So here's some of the emotions that I was feeling: angry, upset, disappointed, discouraged, uncertain, disheartened, distraught, avoiding, cautious, conscientious, concerned. Here's one of my concerns that and this is a crazy. This is where some of our emotions can be unfounded and ungrounded on reality. This is what I'm about to tell you. So one of my little concerns that I'll somehow lose my ability and gift to coach. Like I don't know, like maybe like it's like God has blessed me with this gift to coach people, leaders, and it's almost like I think that, like, hey, tomorrow I may wake up and all of a sudden I lost the gift to coach people. And I know it's crazy, but that has been one of my little kind of low grade concerns. So what I need to do is, like, is that accurate? Is that even a founded and grounded emotion based on actual reality? And again, not that emotions are bad or good, it's just data, it's just information. So where is that coming from, right? It's some more reflection that I need to do. Some other emotions. Again, upset that I feel that there's still some underlying, unrecognized, subtle, low-key, hidden desire to get validated and affirmed and approval from other people. That one has been really upsetting me because I'm noticing some more people pleasing still in there. And man, I just I really want to be on the other side of this people pleasing addiction. And I think I'm 90. I've said 95 to 98%. It's probably more realistic. Let me back that off a little bit and probably say 90%. And I there's probably 10% left in there that I'm still noticing. Like, man, why did I say that? Was I trying to get someone to like me? Was I trying, because here's the other thing too I've caught myself doing is one-upping people, which also absolutely upsets me and frustrates me. Why do I feel like I need to one-up the other person? Like, I can't stand that. I can't stand it when other people do it, but yet here I am catching myself doing it to other people. Man, that's a whole nother ball game of frustration and stuff. So that's another area that I got to work on. It's repulsive to me after living with this people-pleasing addiction for so long that I still have this 10% left. And again, I'm spitballing 10%. Maybe it's even more, right? Maybe it's 15 to 20% people-pleasing addiction that I still have left in me that I'm just still slowly becoming more aware of. So, then I said there is unresolved conflict between some people that I know. I'm trying to figure out what my role and responsibility is, which is causing me some stress and anxiety because I'm not sure, do I get involved? Do I not get involved? If I do get involved, what does that look like? What are going to be the consequences, the ripple effects, all that stuff? Not necessarily, thankfully, from a people-pleasing addiction, but I just, if I do get involved, I want to be coming from an emotionally healthy place with not only my boundaries in top of mind, but also the boundaries of those that are involved. Because again, I don't want to take false responsibility for somebody else's conflict or issue, and try to, again, savior complex, try to come in and save the day. Hey guys, look how great I am, Mr. EQ, coming in to save the day, being the conflict, referee. The conflict facilitator. No. I want to make sure I'm coming from an emotionally healthy place, if I even do anything at all. But anyway, that's causing some stress in there as well. There's emotional pain and emotional injury that's not validated can linger and grow and harden. Emotional pain and emotional injury that's not validated can linger, grow, and harden. That's a really big point that I'm learning through some of this conflict, and watching and observing some of this conflict, kind of as from an outsider's perspective. Okay, some other things here. I'm excited to scale if that's the direction that God takes us. I'm anxious to scale if that's the direction. I want to make sure that, because again, if that's the direction that I go with my coaching business, I just want to do it right. I want to be wise. I want to make smart decisions on the personnel side and on the business side. And I want to be obedient if this is the direction that God wants me to go. If not, I also want to have the wherewithal and the boundaries to say no as well if that's not the direction that we're supposed to go. Another thing that is kind of frustrating and bothering me, I absolutely suck as a spiritual leader of our house. I've just never done a good job at that. And I still have some spiritual PTSD from trying to lead early in our marriage. It was not received very well, and I still am very gun shy, and I still have a lot of emotional work about being the spiritual leader of my house. And that's an example of how my EQ, or lack thereof, has impacted my spiritual walk, and not just my spiritual walk, but my whole family's, spiritual health, if you will, of my family, because again of my emotional reticence and hesitance based on the first couple years of our marriage. And so that's another area that's just been really frustrating, that I have not worked on and worked through that area of my life yet, which is, the clock is ticking, and man, that's another area. Anyway, that's very, very upsetting and frustrating that I've not taken ownership of that area yet and really focused on that yet. I don't feel like I'm doing a good job shepherding our teenage daughter's heart. Speaking of the clock ticking, she's got 4 more years, and then she's, potentially, obviously, if she needs to stay for another year or two or whatever to finish college or finish whatever, get her business off the ground or whatever she's going to do. But I need to be mentally, emotionally prepared for her to leave the house, conquer the world, do whatever God wants her to do in basically 4 years. And not only me mentally, emotionally, spiritually ready for that transition, but also, is she on a glide path? Do we have her on a glide path so that she is going to be ready in 4 years to handle life potentially without us, on her own, as a productive, contributing member of society that can, love well, have boundaries, be a great contributing member, emotionally healthy, emotionally intelligent, spiritually prepared, equipped member of society that can also handle her business financially, physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, all those different areas. And I just have got to do a lot better job. I just don't feel like I've done a very good job at shepherding her heart, which is also frustrating. That's a whole nother. So that's another area that is adding to my stress plate, if you will. I'm also upset that my thankfulness has dropped in a particular area over the past couple months, and that has been very frustrating. So my thankfulness has dropped in a particular area, and that's really frustrating to me. It's true. This is so. Two people served this particular leader recently, and this particular leader did not thank either one of the people that, out of their own goodwill, out of their own initiative, chose to serve this leader, and this leader had no thanks. And man, it triggered me. And I'm like, man, wow, I cannot believe how upset that made me, that seeing this twice ungrateful acts from this leader, why was it so triggering to me? And I still need to figure that out and do a deep dive, but I think one of those reasons is because my own thankfulness has dropped over the past couple months, and it's upsetting me. And I'm like, man, why have I let my selfishness increase and my thankfulness and gratefulness decrease in this one particular area? And that's also been, again, on the stress plate, kind of low grade, under the surface. I haven't been super conscious of it, but I've thought about it here and there, and it's rubbed me sideways every time I think about it. And so I think I've tried to not think about it because of how I've not been doing, how unthankful I have been in this particular area. And again, trying to avoid it, control the situation so I don't feel guilty. Again, by avoiding this area, and that's obviously not the right way to approach or handle this. So that also is on my plate. That has really been frustrating. Upset and disappointed how selfish I am. Man, that's something, an area I definitely don't want to think about, if I can be totally transparent. Just how selfish I am, and that also is repulsive to me. So that's another area that is causing a lot of stress and frustration. I'm also frustrated at a couple folks that I know. And it's frustrating to me that I'm frustrated. Why? I'm asking myself, why should I be frustrated? What level of control, influence, and power do these people have over me that their behavior is impacting how I feel? Right? There's clearly still some I don't know if it's emotional neediness, some emotional codependency. I don't know what it is. I don't know, or the areas that I'm frustrated about them in are the areas that maybe I'm still working on. And so it's frustrating me that I'm frustrated seeing what I have to work on in other people. Anyway, that's another thing I'm still kind of working through. And I just did 2 episodes recently on wanting to master the valley, mastering the valley. And here I literally, again, the last 2 days, I have absolutely not mastered the valley. I've gotten owned and thrashed and rear naked choked by the valley. And so, yeah, man, again, just when I think I'm making a little bit of progress, God gives me some dessert, some serious humble pie. So here's some questions that I wrote down. I've already been talking about quite a few, but here's some other questions. What can I learn from this? Not only the valley, but what can I learn about my failure in handling the valley very well? I didn't handle it very well. I wasn't self-aware. I did not do my emotional intelligence battle drills and exercises. And so what can I learn from this? What is God trying to teach me? how can I get better in the valley? When did this whole most recent trigger start? How did it start? And I think, I talked about that already during the episode here. What are my stories around valleys? What are my beliefs around valleys? What did I do well in the valley? So it's not trying to be, everything is negative and I just completely sucked at it during this valley, but did I do anything well? What did I do well? Thankfully, I've got a podcast that forced me to do this processing here so that it would help me get out of the valley. I mean, even the EQ Mafia. I told someone recently, the EQ, the EQ Mafia, speaking of being selfish, it is as much or more for me because I need a healthy, safe, encouraging community to work on my emotional fitness, because for me, I like to work on stuff. Well, now I'm starting to like to work on stuff alone and in community. Before, when I was emotionally needy, I only liked to work on stuff with other people, and I never wanted to be alone. I always wanted to have some sort of distraction. Why I never liked to sit in silence, because my own thoughts and my own insides and my own reflections, my own emotions scared me and terrified me like a horror film. So that's why I was never comfortable being alone. And because I was so emotionally needy and my people pleaser addiction did not want to be alone, I always wanted to be around other people. So I would constantly seek out getting validated and approved and affirmed. So what did I do well in the valley? What could I have done differently? What will I do the next time, which is kind of a version of the previous question, but it's just asked a little bit differently. What truths can I learn about emotions during this most recent experience? What does God say about emotions? What does God say about valleys? What's one thing I can do differently the next time I find myself in a valley? What took me so long, two or 3 days, for me to recognize that I was even in a valley? I have a little bit of an answer for that. What I think anyway is the answer. Pride. So what took me so long to recognize I was in the valley? Pride. I didn't want to admit that I was in a valley, that I had let myself slip into a valley. Embarrassment, that I had let myself slip into a valley and I was in a valley. Lack of awareness, lack of skill still. Not wanting to admit that I'm in a valley, not wanting to admit that I don't know how to get out of the valley, or that I almost felt kind of emotionally paralyzed to even do my emotional fitness exercises, which is a whole nother thing I need to think about and process. Not knowing what I'm supposed to learn, becoming impatient, wanting to maintain a perceived control, thinking I should be further along in my emotional growth journey after 4 years of intentionally working on it. So that is, boom, another lesson for you all from my, my failures and shortcomings. Hopefully you all can learn from the areas that I'm still working on in some way, or maybe it can give you hope that, man, I'm way further along than Noble is in my emotional growth journey. So, and again, I want to thank Shay Sparks, author and podcast host of The Power of Investing in People, for sponsoring this episode. And remember that emotionally healthy leaders create emotionally healthy cultures and organizations which optimize and maximize outcomes and results.